It's incredible.
Guy, the virtual floor is yours.
Okay, thank you for being there. And today I'm going to talk about human systems integration. I added from virtual to tangible because our life is digitized more and more, and then we need to go to tangible things, you know. So in fact, I'm going to talk about human factors. I'm going to talk about system architecture. I'm going to talk about autonomy design and also mission operation. My work for the last 40 years can be summarized this way. I mostly worked on aircraft, commercial aircraft cockpits. I worked on the space shuttle.
Just wanted to say that up front. We'll talk more about that.
Could you mute,
hello, whoever is speaking, please, can you put yourself on mute?
Okay, thank you very much. So I worked on the space shuttle systems. I worked also the picture on the bottom left corner is actually the lunar rover that we started in 2006, and also I worked on firing room at Kennedy Space Center. In fact, if I summarize the trajectory of what I've done in my career from the late 1970s to now, we moved from correcting what has been done in engineering to adapt, the system to people, to interaction, where we try to design the interaction with computers in between people and complex systems, and then integration, where we started to, in the beginning of the 2000s, we started to integrate complexity within this approach. So I think most of you know this picture, and this is the Apollo 13 mission control room, where the people are very happy because they have succeeded to avoid a terrible accident. We call that actually successful accident. This is not the only one. We had many of these. In fact, human system integration is a matter of technology, organization, and people. And this actually Apollo 13 story really is a very important example of this integration of technology, organization, and people. In fact, I like the terminology top model, technology, organization, people model, and we will come back on this in a few minutes. In fact, the idea is to depart from sequential development, where we engineer a system, and then we develop a user interface, do ergonomics, and then we give that to people for use, and we train the people. Instead, I would actually advocate holistic development, where human and machine are considered at the same time from the beginning of the design process and during the whole life cycle of a system. In fact, here you can see, this is I will come back on this also. This is a multi-agent approach, where you have machine systems, but we can talk also about human systems and interaction links in between. So this is actually a photo of my lab when I was at FIT, and we had these simulators to test new systems on commercial aircraft. In fact, the idea germinated to name this virtual human-centered design. It's virtual because it's actually software-based. It's not real in the sense that we don't fly really, but we have lots of models that are more and more accurate, and we can actually simulate very, very close to the real world what is going on. So in fact, I will advocate virtual prototypes, but also at the same time, we realize that tangibility is becoming an issue because we work in virtual environments, and then we need to define in better terms what tangibility means, and we'll come back on this. Also, we talk about human-in-the-loop simulations, where we don't only simulate an aircraft, but we simulate, the interaction between real people and aircraft, for instance. We also talk about agile development. You see there are several connections between HSI and other fields of systems engineering. Here, agile development is actually incremental design during almost all life cycle, but mostly during design and development. And participatory design, this is another buzzword that I will use. It's about pilots participating in this case in the design and development of a system. So in fact, if I summarize this, the genesis of human systems integration, and I add the tangible interactive systems, I will define this in more detail later. Then you have several disciplines that should be considered. One is engineering, automation, control theory. Another one is computer science, including AI. Another one is human facts and ergonomics, human-computer interaction. So all these generate systems, embedded systems, complex systems. For the first one, computer science generates data science today and robotics. And then human factors is about activity analysis, activity observation, performance metrics, and also situation awareness. Of course, this is not all, but I put some pointers there. And for the human-computer interaction, it's about visualization and interaction design. So this produce several things, like here, we enter into the system engineering era for the last 3 decades. And now we see some more research in cyber-physical systems. For the computer science, it's modeling and simulation and Internet of Things. It's interesting to see the relationships between cyber-physical system and Internet of Things. On the human part, you see ergonomics is not only physical, like it was until the 80s, 1980s, but it's now cognitive and, more importantly today, organizational, social, societal. And then, human-computer interaction came to interaction media and cognitive engineering. So all these led to technology center on the left-hand side, engineering solutions, and human-centered design and system engineering on the right-hand side. So all these should be put together around a framework that I call top-centered design, technology, organization, people. You don't design people, but design shops, you design activities. And so we need to develop methods and tools, and this is really the kind of thing that we are discussing for the last 5 years within the Human System Integration Working Group at INCOSE. And then the idea is to come up with something that is, full of software, but also physical. We are putting together software and hardware in tangible interactive systems. And of course, considering people first. So if you want to read more, I wrote a book on this. It's called Tangitive Interactive Systems. So this evolution. Hello? Okay. So this evolution could be summarized this way. Until the 1980s, hardware was dominant, and physical human issues were dominant in ergonomics and human factors. Then in between the 80s and the 2000s, then we developed a lot human-computer interaction. The computer science developed this field of human-computer interaction, and cognitive issues were taken very seriously at that time. And we continue to do it, of course. I mean, we continue everything, even HFE is continuing. But today, we are more and more interested in complexity, and complexity science comes to the front by trying to study not only the complexity of systems because they are more and more interconnected, but also the complexity of people and the complexity of organization. So for that matter, modeling and simulation is becoming a real important endeavor. So we can model this differently. If I put, the time and two things that are very important in human system integration. One is task. The task is what is prescribed. And the activity. The activity is what is effectively done. And there is a gap sometimes between task and activity. We want to do task analysis, and we do that, but it's better to do the activity analysis. And, HFE, Human Factors and Ergonomics, that started after the Second World War, was doing the activity analysis, of course, but before a design started and after the development of a new system, in flight tests, for instance, but not during the design and development. Came HCI, human-computer interaction, and there, the difference between task and activity was very small, in fact. And then that enabled to develop a lot of task analysis methods. And we developed this new practice that we call interaction design. We design the interface between people and systems. We'll come back on the term systems later. And then came HSI, human system integration, that we are talking about today. And then, because we have these very sophisticated modeling and simulation capabilities today since the early 2000s, we had simulation capabilities before, but they were not realistic enough, I think. And so because we have that, we can test activity since the very beginning of design time. So we move from corrective ergonomics to interaction design to tangibilization of virtual prototypes with the human in the loop, of course. Then, summarizing here, human system integration could be seen as an intersection between several disciplines. Human factors and ergonomics that brings the task and activity analysis, human organizational performance evaluation and metrics, systems engineering that brings the system of systems, the agile development, the design and system thinking, and model-based system engineering. And computer science that brings the human-computer interaction, artificial intelligence, visualization techniques, and modeling and simulation. Obviously, I forgot a lot of things on this diagram here, but really, I think we have the most important things that you need to consider when you talk about human systems integration. This is developed by a community called ACM, Association for Computing Machinery. This is developed by the International Ergonomics Association and various kinds of national organizations like HFES in the States, itself in French-speaking countries, and INCOSE, of course, for the system engineering. And so we are at the intersection of that. So when you start to develop or to design a system, most of the industries consider the V model. I don't want to tell you what the V model is because most of you are system engineers. But in practice, the V model is more like a check mark. Technology center engineering, most of the time, don't put enough human-centered requirement engineering in the beginning, human-centered. So the problem is, in the end, you have to compensate when you want to deliver something by putting a lot of energy in adapting the system to the people in the best case, and adapting people to the system in the worst case. Instead, if we consider human-centered design that is done from the very beginning using modeling and simulation, human-in-the-loop simulation. Then if we put that together, and when we put that together, we want to decrease the gaps, and we want to go to human systems integration. So this is the kind of approach that we will discuss today. From virtual interactive systems to tangible interactive systems. And the idea also is to take into account, the sustainability there. Well, sustainability could be summarized as societal factors, environmental factors, and economical factors. So in fact, all these should be encapsulated within this approach. Then let's comment the shift from the 20th century to the 21st century. During the 20th century, we designed a lot of machines. Engineering, and mostly mechanical engineering, was the king discipline or queen discipline. And then the problem is we realized sometime too late that they were going to have people using these machines. And guess what we did? We put a user interface in between. And then new disciplines appears, human factors on one side, and ergonomics and automation on the other for the user interface. So what I would like to propose today is to depart from this and go to the 21st century. So I introduce some words now, some terms. The approach of the 20th century was inside out. That means that we designed the kernel of a system in the physical environment piece by piece and assemble these pieces at the end, not at the beginning, in fact. The integration was always done at the end. And then we finally designed what I call a control and management room or space or an interface, a user interface, where, okay, so it's inside out in the sense that we start from the kernel, the technological kernel, and we go out to the users. Instead, 21st century should be outside in, means that we start from the purpose and we go to the means, instead of going from the means to the purpose. We start from the, in other words, from the control and management room, what we want to do, what we want to see, and we develop a modeling and simulation of what we, imagine that you want to design a new rover to go to Mars. I mean, and then you design something, virtual first, and you do some simulations, and you play, the games for doing this. And then incrementally, you're going to tangibilize the whole thing to the point that you go back to what we were doing during the 20th century. But the big difference is that you're going from outside in. It means that from purpose to means. From virtual human-centered design to tangible human-centered engineering. So all this is not for free. We don't talk about short term. We are talking about longer term. We are talking about going from inside out to outside in engineering design. That means that we go from prediction to testing possible futures. In other words, prediction is always short term. If you want to predict something, you apply a derivative of a causal derivative of where you are right now, and you predict in the short term. In the long term, prediction doesn't mean anything. But you can imagine possible futures, and you can test them in modeling and simulation. And also, you go from event-driven to goal-driven. Most of our industries are event-driven. They react in the short term. Very, very few big projects are goal-driven, like going to the moon, Kennedy said at the beginning of the 60s, we're going to the moon and come back safe to the Earth. Guess what? The people did it. So this is goal-driven. And also, we go from continuous correction because we start, you know, from inside out, then we need to correct all the time, you know, to adapt people to the machines, to anticipation, where you anticipate some kind of usages, and then you design the technology accordingly. Think about COVID-19 today. What about going, you know, from linear thinking to nonlinear thinking? And what do we do today when we have such a nonlinearity in the system? Very difficult. But I think we need to emphasize complexity in a better way. And complexity is mostly in people and nature. So how can we do that? Here is a way. Today, if I put on the axis of this diagram the life cycle of a system, from concept to development to manufacturing to test to certification to ops maintenance, and I didn't put dismantling or decommissioning, then if you take into account, you know, the resource commitment, most of the time, people commit very quickly, too quickly, because after a while, you have no money to compensate, and then you have to adapt people to machines. Design flexibility is dropping very quickly because of the resource commitment. And also the system knowledge increases when you use the system itself, but in the beginning it's not there. So in fact, you have to wait for a while to get some more system knowledge. I would put human system integration knowledge. Then let's take a different approach, where we use modeling and human-in-the-loop simulation. And let's start by the system knowledge curve. Then you can see that you can learn better in the beginning what system knowledge could be. Of course, there is the gap of virtual, and we have to better measure the gap between virtual and tangible, and we will come back on that. At the same time, design flexibility could be, you know, could stay for quite a while at the up level, you know, and then of course drops afterwards. But this is what we want. And then the resource commitment. Here, one of my colleagues told me, yeah, but the resource commitment, you know, you have to commit also on modeling and simulation tools. So in fact, the ordinate of this curve is going up in the beginning. But the idea is that we gain a lot in the end. So the idea is, and I discussed a lot about how wide should be the modeling and human-in-the-loop simulation contribution. Here I put concept development and up to manufacturing, you know. But I would propose that we think differently. Today, we have this concept of digital twin. A digital twin is a model and simulation of a system that you are developing and that you are using. So in fact, this modeling and human-in-the-loop simulation could be extended during the whole life cycle of a system. And currently, for instance, in my institute, we are developing applications for modeling and human-in-the-loop simulation for maintenance. And in fact, we call that a digital twin that helps maintainers to diagnose and repair things more quickly than they used to do. So, to summarize, what we want is more system knowledge from the beginning and during the whole life cycle, of course, of the system. We want design flexibility, and we see that human-in-the-loop stuff will increase that. Resource management, and what we should have, of course, is modeling and sim at the level of really at the best level we can. But we have more and more companies that are providing tools for that. But we need to continue to develop that. And also complexity analysis. I didn't talk too much about complexity analysis, but this is, I remember when I was a student, even now, one of the, the discipline that is being learned at school, university in engineering is linear algebra. I think we need to learn more about nonlinear algebra and complexity science. And also organization, human-centered design. So it means that the organization is designed also at the same time we design a new technology and we design new jobs, new activities. Remember the top model, technology, organization, people. So what we target is what we call today human systems integration. Here I give a few principles and criteria, if you want, or metrics. They are not the only ones, but this is what comes back very often: safety, efficiency, and comfort. Comfort, most of the time, is called usability, in HCI in particular. So now, I talked about tangibility. What do we mean by tangibility? Something is tangible when it is graspable in the physical sense. For instance, I grasp my glasses, I hold my glasses here, and this is tangible. But now, I try to convince you, and you're not so convinced, and you say to me, what you say is not tangible. It means that I cannot grab the concept. I cannot grab the abstraction that you're talking about. And this is tangibility in the figurative sense. It means understandable, if you want. So both concepts, both meanings of this concept, tangible, are very important to articulate. And this is interesting because we didn't talk too much about this before, because we started from hardware and we went to software during the 20th century. Everything was physically tangible. And then we realized at the end of the century, the 20th century, that automation was an issue. But today, we are doing the opposite. We are going from software to hardware. Everything that we design today is started on a computer. It started on a PowerPoint deck of slides. And we transform that into a model, and we transform that into a simulation, into a video game, and we can fly software aircraft, for instance. And then we go to production, and guess what? More and more now, we 3D print the software for structure and hardware. So in fact, we inverted the approach. 20th century from hardware to software, now we software to hardware. Doing this brings the necessity of developing tangibility metrics. So here's a list. It's not exhaustive, but this is in my book if you want to read it. In the 2016 book, Tangible Interactive Systems. So complexity is one metric. We distinguish, for instance, the intrinsic complexity of the system being developed and extrinsic complexity of the environment influenced by the system. The maturity is this is interesting. Maturity has been developed with a lot of metrics related to processes and not necessarily to products. It's time to see maturity in terms of technological maturity, the product and the technology that we are designing, in terms of maturity of practice, and in terms of societal maturity. I don't develop this because I don't have much time, but I advise you to read more about this. There are lots of papers on this. Stability is about passive and active stability, like in physics, but here is about human system integration stability, robustness and resilience of the system being developed, the system including people, of course. Flexibility, we already talked about flexibility, and sustainability, we already talked about sustainability. So I like this citation from David Fitz. Human capabilities, skills, and needs must be considered early in the design development. It must be continuously considered throughout the development life cycle. So if you ask yourself, what is a system? You know, a system for most engineers is a machine. But in fact, when you hear medical doctors, they talk about the cardiovascular system. They talk about the cognitive system. You know, sociologists talk about political systems. They talk about societal systems. So systems should be considered more like a representation of something in terms of, here in human system integration, of a machine system and a human system. And this is a recursive concept where a human system may include a machine system, for instance, like if you think about a pacemaker for the heart, or a machine system should include a human, like the aircraft includes people. So in fact, this is a human is represented by a human system, and a machine is represented by a machine system. A system, you know, when we develop what system is about, we discover that a system has a function and structure. And as we said that a system is a system of systems, they have function of functions and structures of structures. That can be either physical or cognitive. For the human, cognitive is fine. But for machines now, if you think about a flight management system on board an aircraft, it's a cognitive system. It's the same thing on the structure. A structure could be cognitive and physical as well. So in fact, you know, we used to think a system as an isolated system with an input and an output. But today, it's more important to think about a system as an interconnected system of systems. A system includes subsystems, and a system is part of a bigger system. Same thing for function. You know, we have structures of structures and function of functions. They may not overlap exactly, of course, and they may actually change when you activate the whole thing. And when you activate the whole thing, guess what? We have this yellow emergent function that you didn't anticipate at the very early design time. So in fact, you need modeling and simulation to make this function emerge from activity. And then if you do that correctly, one day or another, you see that there are emergent structures coming up. You forgot actually to implement a part of the system somewhere. And then you have to probably redesign some parts. So an example of this on this picture is actually the TCAS. I was in charge of a national project called POSA, Authority Sharing in the Airspace, during the period 2006-2008 in France, where we worked on the shift from the old air traffic control practices to air traffic management. And we analyzed the TCAS, and the TCAS is about traffic alert and collision avoidance system, namely. So if you put a cognitive function in the head of this guy, you see the function here. This is a separation function. This is a collision avoidance function, if you want. This function was transferred to the machine, to the aircraft, in the form of a TCAS, a traffic alert and collision avoidance system. The point was not so much to design and develop this system, but to understand the emergent cognitive functions from the usage of this system. A very, unfortunately, not famous accident is the Eberlinger accident in 2002. I don't tell the story, but yeah, there are a lot of papers on this. So the question now is that we have a complex system with nodes, people, and machines. They are interconnected. And one of the big issues is to separate some parts to study them in particular. medical doctors and physiologists and biologists know about that for a long time. You know, you can separate the end for the body and replace it and can work. The brain is not separable. Complexity doesn't come from the node only, but mostly from the links. And then you have these emerging functions that characterize the maturity of the system, in fact. The more you know about emerging functions, the more you know about the maturity of the system, and the more you formalize the need for coordination rules. So therefore, a system of systems is a living organism with people. So this is an example of what we are doing right now with an oil and gas company, coordinating some, remote operations of robots on a platform on the ocean, for instance. It's very complex. And we started from virtual human-centered design of things and going more and more into tangible things by putting 1, 2, 3 robots on a physical plant. In fact, today, autonomy is very buzzword now, but we are moving from automation to autonomy. Some of you know about this diagram. It's called the Rasmussen's model. This actually modeled the human. The first level, the skill-based behavior, modeled the stimulus reaction and response behavior. The second level is conscious. That simulates, the conscious level of situational recognition, pattern matching, of this, and then inference of tasks from that, but at the conscious level. The first level is subconscious, and then if the second level doesn't work, then you have the third level, that is the knowledge-based level, where you give a meaning to what you see, and it's not necessarily stored in the brain or in procedures, and you have to make sense of what you're observing and deduce some decision and planning. So these levels were transferred to the machine, between the 1930s and 1960s. The first autopilot was installed on commercial aircraft in 1932. That was Boeing. Electrical engineering, mechanical engineering, control theory were used to do that, to autopilot, for instance. The second level was done during the 1980s with the flight management system, for instance. And operation research, optimization, expert system were used. And then after that, humans were actually studied more cognitively speaking, with cognitive engineering, human sciences, and social sciences. And today, we think that autonomy is around here. We think that artificial intelligence could take that into account. We'll see. So in fact, to summarize, we first automated machines and people with procedures. In fact, we automated some functions on the human side and the machine side. But in fact, there are situations that are unexpected and sometimes unknown, COVID-19, for instance. And then you have to solve the problem. So you need to have agents that are autonomous in the sense that they know about fundamental principles and they have more knowledge than the other to solve the problem, probably finding medication and solutions at the societal level. All this is moving from rigid automation to flexible autonomy. The institute I'm running right now is called FlexTech for that reason. And then this is about allocation of human and machine functions. So, slogan, from rigid automation to flexible autonomy. So I go faster because I see the time. And then you have two parallel ways: traditional engineering with rigidity on one side with automation, the automation we did up to now, and on the other side, digital engineering with human system integration at the center. This is what I really promote right now. With the autonomy that we need to better understand not only the autonomy of machines, but also the autonomy of people using machines. And then the idea is to co-adapt human and systems. So you already saw this diagram, so I don't comment it again, with the various communities. What I want to say before I stop is that we started a first conference last year in September in Biarritz, France, HSI 2019. That was really a big success. And we're going to continue in 2021, probably in California. We don't know yet, but we were stopped by this pandemic in cooperation with IEA and SEM. But we decided in between, so the conferences will be every 2 years, and we decided in between to organize workshops. We had one in Torrance, California, during the international workshop of INCOSE in 2020, January. We had another one that was supposed to be in Frankfurt, but we had it via WebEx last week here, in Europe. And we plan to have one in India in July, but we wait for confirmation. As everybody, we don't know what is going to happen. And another one is planned in October in Haifa, Israel. Date will come. So I want to advertise, of course, my last book. It was delivered at the end of February this year. It's called Human System Integration for Virtual to Tangible. So you have 200 pages of what I talked about today. It's more detailed. And thank you very much. Hello?
Thank you for a great presentation. We have 3 questions in, so audience, here is your opportunity to add more questions to the Q&A. So the first question, people can be designed in terms of knowledge, skills, and abilities required to operate in the system. With a human in the system, the associated function sets for decision-making and situation awareness can be looked at as architectural elements. How would you propose to develop human architectural views in a disciplined way?
So first of all, the chance we have right now is that we have more modeling and simulation capabilities, and this is what makes human-centered design possible. But we have to acknowledge that this is in the virtual world. So in fact, situation awareness, decision-making, action-taking, risk-taking could be simulated very early during the design process. The problem is when you design something, there are 2 kinds of designs. One is in continuity with what exists today, and the other one is disruptive design, disruptive solutions. In the first case, we can take an old aircraft and put some new things and test the difference with the old aircraft. And then we have methods already to do that in simulation. For disruptive design, then more or less we have to do the same, except we have to design the full virtual system, and that's difficult. I remember I was involved at JPL at some point 3 years ago. We had a simulation of the Mars 2020 rover, and we had 120 people in a room, and several rooms in fact, simulating during 3 days interactions between them and the rover, the virtual rover. There was no rover on the moon, but we used what was available on Curiosity, and we managed to do a pretty good job, to derive some emerging functions and potential structures. More?
So a question here, and it uses an acronym which I'm not familiar with, so hopefully you may. Is a long-term goal-driven design realistic in a VUCA world?
Well, long-term means that we have to anticipate. Long-term means that we have to be goal-driven. And, when you study, I'm also a cognitive scientist, and I taught cognitive science for quite a while. And in fact, what you teach cognitive science 101 is that the behavior of people is both event-driven and goal-driven. It's both reactive and intentional. And it's both, in fact. The combination of the two is called opportunistic behavior. So the problem is, it seems that our society forgot the goal-driven. In fact, we have to go more on, anticipation of possible situations. Scenario-based design, for instance, is the solution. When you want to do a play, a theater play, I mean, the director has a play written, and play the play, afterwards. But in fact, you have to do. And also, there is another thing that I need to put into the picture is the fact that we need to move from the mason practice to the architect practice. In other words, the architect, the mason will put a brick on a brick and then eventually build a very, very solid house. But unfortunately, at some point say, well, here there should be a window. Then you draw a hole and you put a window. Or you need to move the door on the right, and then you have to do another hole. And then this is the patch approach. When you see software engineering, sometimes it looks pretty much like this. And so the architect who you will hire will come to see you, and he will not talk about bricks, he will not talk about beams, he will not talk about all these materials, and he will talk about you. He will talk about if you have friends, a family, you visit people during the weekend, if you want the sunshine in your bedroom during the summer, I don't know. And then come back with a prototype, a virtual prototype. Now, some architects, they have HoloLenses, and they can show you the house, and then you can walk in the house and then say, oh no, the window, I would prefer to have it on the right. And then you can do that immediately. So that's another way of doing human system integration, by not adding an interface in the end of the development process.
So I've been educated. Thank you, Kevin. VUCA stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. So next, I've had a question as well. Could you go back to the previous slide? I think people would like to take more information about your book.
Oh, the book?
There we go. Yeah. When was the book available?
The book is available now. I mean, it's online. There is a version online. If you go to Amazon, I think, this is published by Taylor and Francis in Miami, and the paper version is available since the end of February.
Good. So I have a question here. How do you see gaming as a tool for this early simulation?
Well, it's obvious that gaming will play a very important role. In this, of course. I mean, for me, when I talk about human-in-the-loop simulation, I think about gaming. We are using more and more Unity 3D. This development engine tool. Unity 3D is, I don't want to make too much publicity for companies, but yes, this is exactly the direction.
I have a question. The classic systems engineering approach to address human integration is to develop a CONOP and the identification of higher level system interactions. Does an HSI approach change how CONOP is thought about?
Yes, definitely yes, it would change, because most of the time today, the CONOPs are done, or OPSCON, I mean, there's a debate now, CONOPS, OPSCON. The CONOPs are designed around tables and by discussions and with experts and things. This is good. But here you can define CONOPS by modeling a simulation, a human-in-the-loop simulation, which is much better because you don't talk about task only, but you talk about activity. If you followed what I said, the difference between task and activity is the difference between what is prescribed and what is effectively done. Of course, it's not 100% guaranteed that you will, find the right solution, but it's much better than before.
So another question. When I do model-based systems engineering, I usually develop a functional view and a structural view or model. Can HSI be integrated into these two views, or do we need an additional view on the system for HSI?
Answer is yes. Yes, of course. Yes. This is very compatible.
Okay. So, another question. What techniques and tools do you recommend for integrating human cognition and performance modeling into conventional MBSE processes?
I can tell you what we're doing right now with the French Air Force. We are involved in the development of performance metrics. This is exactly thank you for the question. I mean, we didn't talk about that before, but so we are developing performance metrics, and in fact, of course, we have a lot of literature on performance, but of human factors after a system is being developed and manufactured. Now we need to develop methods that could be used very quickly during the design and development process. We call that formative evaluation versus summative evaluation. Summative is more certification, if you want, but the formative is for the redesign. And in fact, to answer the question, what performance metrics should we develop? Well, this is related to what I said. This is related to tangibility. It's related to the complexity. It's related to the maturity. It's related to the, and then you have to take into account the maturity of practice, for instance. How do you measure maturity of practice? Let me take an example. At the beginning of the 20th century, most of the drivers of cars were mechanics. They were very specialized guys. They were called chauffeurs, and they knew about the engine. They could repair actually the car. They were not necessarily the owner. The owner was in the back, like in the past with the stagecoach. So experts, are there when the system is not mature. When the cars got very mature at the end of the 20th century, most of the people didn't know about the carburetor, didn't know about the engine. It failed, go to the garage, and it's going to be fixed. The problem was the money. But at the same, this is technological maturity. But at the same time, there was the maturity of practice. We saw during the 20th century specialization of cars. You had cars for family, cars for trucks. We had racing cars. We had this is the maturity of practice. You specialize for a specific activity, and then this could be measured as well. And so that's and the performance depends on this kind of maturity, in fact. And you have the societal maturity as well. For instance, at the beginning of the 1990s, Apple had this Newton tablet. I was a fan of that, but it didn't work because the society was not prepared to accept that. And then we waited about 15 years to get the iPad. So all this should be measured, in fact, and this is related to people. If you want more specific measures, of course, we can measure the situation awareness, the decision making, the workload. We had a lot of very low-level measures. You have intermediary criteria, and then you have high-level metrics, like, for instance, trust, collaboration. All this will be published in a few months.
So there's a question here. You said predictions are short-term and testing future possibilities is long-term. but don't they both have serious problems in assumptions that make them both only just short-term guesses? If not, what gives you confidence of future possibilities testing?
The reason I said that prediction is short-term is because most of the prediction models are based on derivatives. A derivative in mathematics is actually the tangent, if you want, to a curve, a multi-parametrical curve. This is difficult to represent, in brain. But it's necessary for short-term because if you look, for instance, at the parabola, when you do the tangent, the derivative at some point, if you go too far, the error is getting bigger and bigger. So in fact, the prediction is necessarily short-term. So all the businesses that look at prediction short-term, they're doing extremely well. Look at supermarkets. I mean, they can change the prices of things every 10 minutes. So this is one thing. I'm talking about formal predictions, but in contrast, and this is event-driven. In contrast, goal-driven is actually I want to go there. I want to go to the moon, or I want to build the therapy for COVID-19. Okay, this is goal-driven. And what should I do? What are the steps to reach the goal? There are sub-goals, sub-goals, etc. So it's different. It's not a prediction. It's a demonstration that your solution is valid, in fact. And this is interesting. If the people are interested, there were a mathematician at Stanford called Polya who wrote a small book with the title "How to Solve It." I really recommend that to better understand what I mean by goal-driven. In mathematics, good mathematicians, they have the solution, and then they use the grinder, the methods to demonstrate the solution. But going step by step, like you sail with your boat against the wind, it's extremely difficult and sometimes impossible.
So we've reached the hour. There are still a few more questions, but what I'll do, I'll make those available to Guy so that he can contact you if he so desires to continue the discussion. So
okay.
you could go to the first of my ending slides.
I'm gonna send you. Okay, thank you very much. I will send the PDF, so it's going to be available.
Okay, thank you. So thanks for a great talk, and thank you to the audience for your questions and your time.
Thank you.
The next slide changes shows our upcoming schedule. The next webinar will be held on Wednesday, the 20th of May, 2020. There's been a change to the schedule. Becky Reed and Ian Presland have asked to postpone their webinar until later in 2020. And Courtney Wright has stepped in and is going to present on the many different paths to INCOSE certification on this date. And then on Wednesday, the 17th of June, Pascal Papa will present a webinar on systems engineering-driven modeling and simulation method, a paradigm shift in digital system development. Additional webinars will be offered typically on the third Wednesday of each month through 2020. Please note that if you go to the website shown here, you will see more information about the webinar series, including a way to view the last 135 webinars, and soon this webinar as well. Next slide, please. As mentioned earlier, you can now claim 1 PDU credit towards your systems engineering professional recertification by attending this webinar. You may also claim this credit retrospectively for INCOSE webinars that you have attended and where attendance meets the qualification requirements. Please contact INCOSE if you wish to know which webinar you attended and if you met the qualification requirements. Next slide, please. And finally, I'd like to express my thanks again to Lockheed Martin Corporation for sponsoring the 2020 INCOSE webinar program. Thank you again, and goodbye.